Good morning and greetings from Washington, D.C. Thank you for joining us today, especially to those of you keeping odd hours to participate in this conference. My name is Shaheen Khan, President of the World Bank Family Network, WBFN. It gives me great pleasure to welcome all our members in country office locations who have gathered here virtually to celebrate a momentous occasion in WBFN history. This is the first time ever that we have organized a virtual conference for our members in country office locations. The first in a series of conferences covering topics and issues relevant to our members worldwide. We are grateful to the WBFN Worldwide Program team for putting this series together. The team consists of about 6 volunteers at headquarters and over 70 champions in more than 50 countries, working together to build a global network of spouses and partners connecting with each other to sustain a vibrant and enjoyable community worldwide. The success of the team has been phenomenal over the past 2 years, and I invite you to connect with our many WBFN champions and become a part of the community. The Vice President of the Human Resources Department of the World Bank Group, Mr. Sean McGrath, supports and appreciates the contributions of spouses and partners of the World Bank Group staff. And I would like to present the message that he has for all our members. Just a note that the sound quality of the message is not that great, but we will be sending all of you a link to the video after the webinar so you can go back and listen to it. Thank you all, and here is Mr. McGrath's message.
Well, Shaheen, thank you very much for the opportunity to just say a few words about HR and the World Bank Group in the context of the World Bank Family Network. It's interesting when you look back over the last number of years, the work that the Family Network have done, particularly in country offices. As somebody who's come into the organization, I was always wondering how we got things done, how people moved around, how we actually got our talent from A to B. And you realize that you have some hidden talent, and the wiring doesn't happen by accident. So having the World Bank Family Network doing the work, not as a nice to have, but actually you really need to have, for us is hugely important as an organization. Our clients expect us to have the best talent in the world. You can't deploy talent from one part of the world to the other, certainly from DC out, unless you know that the package is complete. And by I mean the package is the family. At the end of the day, the 9 to 5 people come to work and do a fantastic job. But if you're moving your family to new locations, your spouse may have to give up work, your kids going to new schools, meeting new friends, all of that is stressful. And it can be either stressful or pleasurable. And at the end of the day, I think what we've seen from experiences and importantly, feedback from clients and from staff, what you see is the work that we've done, for example, in Kenya, Beijing, clearly what we've seen is that the environment created by the family network in these areas is absolutely phenomenal. And it's not just the invitation or the cup of coffee to say hello, but it's actually the supporting network that we put together. If the World Bank Family Network in our country offices weren't doing this, we'd have to do it somewhere else. And don't forget, we're actually doing this for free. So anytime we see our family network, just say thanks, because I personally am very, very happy and indeed exceptionally grateful for all the work that they're doing, both here in DC, but importantly, the real wisdom and indeed the boundaries that they're bringing to all our country offices. And the last thing I would like to do this evening is just to introduce a new initiative by the World Bank Family Network, which is really a series of conversations we're having for staff and indeed for specialists. And the first one is to get your head around cultural shock, which Yvonne and the team have done. I really hope you find it interesting and useful, and be delighted to get your feedback as a result. Thank you.
Hello.
Hello, Sari?
Hello, everyone. This is Marielle. Hello.
Oh, hi, Marielle.
Hi, I'm. I don't know what happened to whatever. The phone is fine.
Okay. Are we all good?
Okay. Yes.
So, good morning, everyone. My name is Sari Kastreen, and I am the Worldwide Team Coordinator here in Washington. My team and I are very excited to launch these roundtable conversations between experts and members. As Shaheen mentioned, this is the beginning of an ongoing series of events tailored to you members in country office locations. We plan to have a new, exciting conference for you every 3 to 4 months on topics that we know are of high interest to most of you. For example, like third culture kids and career development and portable carriers. And we will have extremely interesting experts presenting, so make sure you don't miss out. Today, how to manage culture shock is on the agenda. As Sean McGrath said in his message, relocation can be a stressful time and a time of disorientation that can be hard to get your head around. Knowing what culture is and how you navigate through it can help, and we hope that you will find the presentation useful. We couldn't find a more suitable culture shock expert than Yvonne Quay, who works for the Global Mobility in the bank in Washington. Luckily for us, Yvonne jumped on the idea, and she has been tirelessly working with us to create and adjust the content and delivery. Many thanks to Yvonne for all of your efforts, time, and support for the World Bank Family Network. The floor is yours, Yvonne. Thank you.
Okay, and we are getting ready for Yvonne. It's coming right up now. Sorry about that. Here we are. Yvonne, please unmute your microphone, and then the floor is yours, Yvonne.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Sari, for your kind words, and good morning and good afternoon to everybody. This is, as Shaheen says, a momentous occasion. It's the first in the series, and it's also the first that we are doing a webinar in when Washington, D.C. offices are closed. So we don't have, as it is, the tech laboratory. But anyway, we hope that you will enjoy it. And hello again. Some of you may have met me in person when you lived in D.C. or when I visited country offices, especially if you were in Africa or Asia. For those of you that I haven't met, my name is Yvonne, and I'm from Singapore. And like you, I have lived and worked in 5 countries and over 3 continents. I am part of a bicultural marriage. I have had children who moved school 3 to 4 times.
WebEx. Enter your access code or meeting number followed by pound.
And they live to tell the tale. So today, we are going to talk about get your head around it, how evidence from neuroscience can help you manage culture shock. The first time I experienced culture shock, I didn't know what hit me. We had just arrived in Hong Kong, and I could not believe that there wasn't a square inch on the pavement for me. Someone had run into the birthday cake that I had just bought to celebrate my husband's birthday. I was really upset with these Chinese. If you're in Hong Kong, I think somebody is. By the way, you know what I mean. Okay, that's just not 1 square inch of ground around you. So I went back and wrote a tirade to my brother about how awful Hong Kong was. And there wasn't a square inch on the pavement where I could walk. And he wrote back and just said, I've been studying this. I think you're suffering from culture shock. What is culture shock? If you can, please send some words that you associate with culture shock. Use the chat box and send your words to Anne. Let us see what your words are and why we associate these words with culture shock.
Okay, some are very fast on the keyboard. I get loneliness and stress and when somebody says distress, frustration.
Thank you, Anne. So the words loneliness, stress, distress. Let's look at this picture. This shows how it is like before you move. And you move. This is probably where those concepts of stress, distress, and loneliness come in. When you look at how you're going to unpack this box. So I'm going to ask you to respond by typing yes in your chat box. How many of you identify with these feelings?
I'm receiving a yes here. Another yes. Yes.
Okay, terrific. Thank you. I think the consensus is that we all feel like this in some shape or form before we move. So if we look again at the next slide, this is how we are before we move, more or less, at a previous location. Why is this so? Because you knew how things work. You had control over your environment and, well, more or less. We don't have control over everything. If your child got ill, you would know how to contact the doctor. You would know which hospital to drive your child to in an emergency. You would know where to get your favorite cheese. I don't know about the rest of you, but having a good hairdresser is very important to me. So you know where to get your hair cut. Then you would be able to interpret your host country nationals. Why are they laughing when you actually think they should look terribly upset for what they've just done? You could drop in at a friend.
Enter your access code or meeting number followed by pound.
You have moved. And this is why words like stress, loneliness, frustration, distress come into your mind. Because you have
your entry is not valid or the meeting is not started yet.
You have to
re-enter your access code or meeting number followed by pound.
Unpack this box, not only just for yourself, but for your family. So culture shock is what you experience then. What is it?
Your entry is not valid or the meeting is not started yet. Re-enter your access code or meeting number followed by pound.
When you enter a culture very different from the one to which you are accustomed. The intensity of culture shock is related to the difference between the last location and the present location. Now, I like to actually think of it more as a phase experience because we all take time to adapt. And we oscillate between phases. I call it phases of adaptation rather than culture shock because you are moving towards adaptation. So what are these phases? The first phase, the key phase, as you go through, begins with the honeymoon. Before I go into the key phrases, let me tell you something shocking about culture shock.
Enter your access code or meeting number followed by pound.
The first thing is that to a greater or lesser extent, everybody goes through culture shock. Now, if somebody tells you that he or she isn't doing so well and everything is just fine, well, that person may or may not be telling the whole truth. Because culture shock occurs as a consequence of moving. It happens to a greater or lesser extent. So remember that. Now, I would like you to think back to the previous moves you've had. Did you find some more difficult than others? Why do you think that happened? Now, let us walk through each phase of culture shock. as this may help you understand the experiences you have had and what you went through, and hopefully it will shed some light. The honeymoon stage. If you were very excited about the move, the honeymoon can last for quite a long time. As the name suggests, everything is a novelty. Those of you who know me know I love romantic analogies. The honeymoon is very much like the honeymoon in our marriage, the things we thought that was so charming about our spouses during perhaps the honeymoon stage and courtship may not be so charming right now. So at this point, everything is a novelty. Even a power cut gives you an opportunity to have dinner by candlelight. But for some people, the honeymoon doesn't last for a long time. They arrive at the airport, the luggage is lost, and the honeymoon is over. So the honeymoon stage very much depends actually on whether you wanted to come. Were you excited about the move? It also depends, I feel, very much on what happens to you in the early days. For instance, if you get pickpocketed on your first morning in town, I think you would agree that the honeymoon will be over fairly quickly. Then we move to the next stage, the shock stage. Now, generally speaking, this comes 2 to 3 months later, after the initial period of settling down. In the first stages, you're so caught up with getting settled, doing all the things that are needed. I don't have to tell you what they are: finding the house, getting the children to school. And then suddenly you realize, gosh, what's going on? And the typical indicator of this stage is polarization. And you tend to say, see, and feel. And note that I say, see, and feel. That everything back home or in your last posting was perfect. And everything here of everyone is wrong. So things are not efficient, not smart, not good, not. I just learned this new word for this. It's called a nomatic. That is the opposite. That is no on automatic. So the destination is the cause of all the problems you encounter. Now, even small children can go through this shock stage. I remember a story about a little boy who fell down in school and his knee was bleeding. And his first comment was, oh, it would not have happened in Hong Kong. That was his last location, so he was going through culture shock too. Now, this stage can last for quite a while, depending on different factors, or last a short time. You may start to come out to the next stage and towards live and let live. On the slide, it shows 2 dips, because often when we return home from home leave or our first trip back, we experience a small shock. It could be homesickness. Sometimes, actually, it's the reverse. The first returning home, or sometimes you go back to the place that you left behind, that you just left. And the going back actually brings closure to the grieving for the last location. Now, coming to terms with reality, you think, I'm here, what can I do? And you reach this stage where you can see the good things and the bad things, the pros and the cons. Say, for instance, the traffic congestion in cities like Manila and Nairobi. Well, there's nothing you can do about it. And you start to organize your life around this reality. Not, of course, that it doesn't take its toll over time. Adaptation. Live and let live. That is adaptation. You have friends now. You have found your niche in the community. The children like the school they're in. and you start to feel comfortable. And you might even be willing to consider extending your assignment. The place starts to feel like home. So what affects adaptation? I'm going to ask you to send Anne some words that come to mind when you think about adaptation.
Please send your words to me. Humor, flexibility, understanding, cultural understanding, knowing about the whole process, having friends, support systems, friends. Let's see if other words are coming. Ease. Over to you again, Ivan.
Thank you. So it is nice to see that you already know what it takes to adapt. All these things are something that we will be talking about in what are the factors that affect adaptation. And I think it's so, we'll see as we continue in the session how important the social networks are and building up that new support system, which I'm sure you all know only too well how important a role the World Bank Worldwide Program plays in this. So let's go on with the factors that affect adaptation. Okay, it's not easy when it comes at certain inflection points. For example, if you move with a teenager, one of the developmental tasks is self-differentiation. To become a young person, you need to separate from your family, more independence, and then when you move, the challenges of the developmental task remain, but the child then, who prefers to spend time, because that's the developmental task, now has no friends. Then the child who wants some measure of independence, for instance, taking public transport, now you move. So your child cannot use public transport perhaps, because first thing, public transport often is the locations that we are in is not safe. Then the child needs a driver or needs you to drive them around. So this adds a challenge to the process of adaptation. For another example, if you have a sick parent at home and you're very worried and you feel you've left your siblings with the burden of care, this will affect your ability to adapt at that point. Or if you're having your first child and you would really have valued the support system, particularly of your mother and your close family, and you're alone. So this will definitely affect the rate at which you would be able to adapt. Okay, the next one, which somebody mentioned earlier, cultural understanding. Okay, is the exposure to other cultures. Once you have moved, I think it's two things. First thing is you must know your own triggers. I think self-knowledge is very important. What are my triggers? What would really upset me? For instance, not being able to have your hair cut? Well, if that's it, find a good hairdresser. And what can I do to make sure it doesn't happen? Or reduce the probability of big problems. Now, exposure to other cultures. Sometimes I think we remember and yet we forget, because I think of what happened to us on a recent holiday. We were waiting for a ferry in Culebra, Puerto Rico, and I was getting very, very irritated because the ferry departure time kept changing. And suddenly, my daughter turns around to me and says, "Mom, you know from the Philippines they don't care about time." And it struck me at that moment how she really understood this because of her own experience of living in different countries. So shame on Mom to have forgotten about that and not having the cultural understanding. Expectations and goals. It's important that we have realistic expectations and goals of the assignment. For instance, time is important, meaning how reliable are timelines? When you are going to have something delivered, or if a workman is coming to your home to do a repair, how reliable is this time frame? Will 10 a.m. mean I'll come before lunch? Or does it mean 10 or 15 minutes after 10 a.m.? So having realistic expectations of our hosts. And we also need to have realistic expectations of ourselves. It is good to have goals, personal goals for each assignment, because I think it helps you to focus when everything is very unstructured. Value systems. Take communication, for example. This usually causes a lot of challenge when you move, for instance, from a culture, if you're direct, to an indirect culture, because the purpose of communication in a direct culture is information sharing. In an indirect culture is harmony. So those of you who are now listening in from Hong Kong, from Bangkok, I'm sure you realize that the Asians actually never say no. But that doesn't mean that they agree with everything that you say. So with direct cultures, it's very much easier, because if you ask a question, they'll answer you. For instance, if you need a report done and you say, can you complete this by Friday lunchtime? If you were in a direct culture, they'll say yes or no. If you're indirect culture, they may say, well, if it can be, or maybe that even sounds too clear because the doubt is in my voice. So when a culture is different from the culture we're used to, the adaptation is wider. Now, there is conflicting opinion about that. Other people say that sometimes it's more difficult to move to a culture that is similar. And we do have the very common saying about the UK and the US being separated by a common language. In that sense, the adaptation is wider because we expect it to be the same. And actually, it is not the same. And those of you who know England and know the US know how true this is. So I think one of the ways in which we actually sort of, in a very common sense way, explain how we feel about places because of values. We say, oh, I feel at home here. And in other countries, you think, well, I can live here, but, you know, I wouldn't have to. I wouldn't if I didn't have to. So we move on to the next slide, which is the importance of saying goodbye. And I think often we can't face it, especially if we're very happy in the location. We've set up a good life. We are not yet ready to go. And we, like our children, have unfinished business and have not had the time to grieve. And sometimes with our children, we underestimate how important it is for them, too, to say goodbye to their favorite things, friends, and people. Often grieving and letting go takes time, but do not underestimate how important it is, because it is as we are able to let go that we make good beginnings. So in the end, you know, this whole journey is one of gains and losses. I'm sure you know that. So I'm preaching to the choir, really. So do you have any questions at this point? Please send them to Anne.
Yes, Yvonne, when you spoke about expectations and goals, there was a question asking, what would you say is the usual time frame from culture shock to the live and let live state that you spoke about before?
Well, you know, it's interesting because in the academic literature, they will tell you when to sort of expect culture shock. And I remember a workshop participant many years ago saying to me, you know, when you talked about culture shock, I didn't find that very helpful because my responses and reactions did not follow the time frame. And I was wondering, oh, what's happening to me? Why is this? So I actually think over time now, and looking back at my own experience and that of others, that there is no specific time frame. Because we are very individual, we have our personalities, our change quotient, as it were, meaning how quickly do we respond to change? Some of us are slower, some of us are faster. So I think it's much more productive to think of the indicators of each phase to tell us, okay, gosh, I might be in this phase right now. For instance, like culture shock. When you start all of a sudden blaming the host and the environment and everybody else for everything that goes wrong, then you know, gosh, you know, I must be going through this attack stage at this moment. And I actually think we oscillate from depending on what's going on. You know, on a bad day, when the power doesn't work and the water truck doesn't come and there's no electricity, we feel the shock much more than on a day when you're having a nice cup of tea with your friends or your parents are visiting. Okay, so we oscillate. And sometimes you never know how long it will take. So, but you can help to jumpstart yourself into a new phase. We need time to mourn our losses. So it's actually a fine balance of mourning well, but not too long. So if you can remember that, of mourning well, but not too long.
Okay, thank you, Yvonne. There's another question here. Can we have an example of a kind of goal that one can set?
I mean, I think, you know, for instance, you can set small goals to say, okay, you can treat yourself by saying in 3 months' time, you know, we will go to the beach, or depending on what country you are, visit, you know, one of the World Heritage Centers. Or you can set a goal by saying, you know, I will, until I can find a job, I will do an online course, something that provides some structure. And I think for spouses, because you're giving all the time, especially in the initial stages of the move, I think it's very important to have a goal that is about you. So whatever you think it could be, something that you would do to reestablish yourself. You know, or you can go into assignment thinking, okay, I often say this in the workshops in Washington when we're talking about self goals, meaning for myself. It's like, what song do I want to sing right now? What's going to be the song of my assignment? You know, is it to find a good volunteer opportunity? What is it? Does that help?
I hope so. If it wasn't answer enough, please chat again to me, and we'll ask the question later, or ask further questions later. Okay, I don't have more questions for this part right now, Yvonne, at this time.
Okay. So we move on to family culture shock. Now, we mentioned earlier that everybody goes to culture shock. So the family experience culture shock too. So what is family culture shock then? It is a collective experience. And do not underestimate that your children can go through culture shock, even if they are too young to articulate it. Young children can miss grandparents. They can miss caregivers. It was actually a great surprise to me when I realized this, because my daughter was only 15 months old when we moved. That was a long time ago, of course. And I found her crying inconsolably in her cot. And when I came to carry her, she did not stop crying. And she kept on crying. And then I realized through her cries that she was actually calling out for my mother, her grandma. So it was then that I realized, gosh, she might be 15 months and cannot explain. But she was obviously missing her grandmother, who spent a lot of time with her just before we left. Each member of the family struggles with gaining equilibrium. So what does this mean? It means that people go through culture shock at different rates. Now, often you see this in children. You could have one child who's an extrovert and adjust to school very quickly, and a child who's an introvert. And to make things worse, this is a class of unfriendly people. Or it is really unfortunate if this happens, that there is a bully in the class, and then it is really difficult to settle in. So that child might take a bit longer than the others. I have an example of, say, two brothers who just recently moved to Washington, D.C. And what happened there was that one brother loves football as well, as Americans call it, soccer. And as a result of that, the child settled very, very quickly because he had playtime and he was also very good at it. And so he's now got a whole lot of friends and they all think he's great and they want to be his friend. And he has an older brother who is quieter, not sporty, and he is having difficulty, and he constantly talks about not having friends at playtime because everybody is playing soccer and he doesn't want to play soccer. So we can see how this makes a difference. Initially, it's about loss of control over a new environment and surroundings, and later it's about individuals' behavior. And so what is very typical, and I'm sure you will identify with this at some point, you could have a dinner table conversation one evening and you have one child who says, oh, I just love it here. I love my new school. And the other sibling says, I hate it. I want to go. So the first thing we see is that each member of the family reacts differently. Each member has his or her own perspective. It's important to remember and to allow each person to address his feelings. Now, this is my favorite. As we have all done this, we pick children up from school and we ask them, oh, have you had a nice day? And the child replies, no, I hate it. And we immediately say, no, you really enjoyed it. It was good. Now, why do we do that? Because we want them to enjoy school. That make us feel a lot better. But that's our perspective. So those are the things that we need to watch out for and to really understand that we go through it at different paces and each has a different perspective, even if we all belong to one family. And you have your own perspective too. I think we mentioned before about the working spouse, about ourselves, that we often neglect ourselves. But if we go back to the working spouse, they too have their own perspective. I know it, in a way it is easier, but they also have their challenges, the challenges that they face in the office. So I think it's probably more productive to think about the different challenges, that everybody has different types of challenges. Children at different ages, and so I think moving with teenagers, I think all of you would agree, is much more challenging because they have what we call the developmental tasks to contend with anyway, on top of adaptation. So what is it like for others? It's important to be mindful of that, especially at this time, and to remind each other that we all have a different point of view. And we all need understanding, because I think we grieve at different rates and we adjust at different rates.
Yvonne,
so,
may I just interrupt here?
Sure.
A comment.
Yes.
Ask you to please talk a bit more about the relationship between the working spouse and the one not yet working, or looking in other ways to connect to the new culture.
So let me try the first part, the differences between the two. I think, as we all know, the dual career dilemma is not going to go away. And it's always much more difficult for the spouse who is accompanying the working spouse. I think the working spouse, if you talk about the World Bank setup, if you are relocating already as a member of staff, I'm not talking about the people who have joined the bank straight to the field, you have a sense of the culture of the organization. So although things might be different, and they are different in the field, there is a strange sense of familiarity, and there are familiar structures. So in one sense, they have their own challenges, but they are different from yours. I always think of the accompanying spouse as somebody like a sculptor. You have this piece of stone, and you have to craft something out of it. Every time you move, you have to say, so what shall I do here? If you are, as we all know, crafting a sustainable career is not easy. So you will have to look into the local environment, and you will have to see what is it in your host country, what are the opportunities, how do you fit in? So I think they are different. And I think sometimes it alters the power dynamic between the couple. I mean, if we're really honest, I think it does make a difference. If the marriage is working well, I think you'll find an equilibrium in that. If the marriage is not working well, I think sometimes the relocation can exacerbate the imbalance. So do you think I've answered that question?
Yes, thank you, Yvonne. I think that's fine. Please continue.
Okay, so the art of surfing the waves. Now, we're going to talk today about a new sort of brain-based model called SCARF, which will hopefully help us to surf the waves. SCARF is a brain-based model for collaborating with and influencing others. And it helps us understand the true drivers of human behavior, what they call the common factors that activate the threat and reward responses in our brains due to social situations. So it is the lens by which to understand threats and responses. In the first instance, it provides us with self-awareness of how we are responding and reacting to social situations. And increased self-awareness, I always feel, helps us to understand ourselves better. So let me tell you a little bit about SCARF first. The interesting thing about SCARF is that it is based on neuroscience research. And the SCARF model is a brainchild of David Rock, who is a thought leader. Now, he was the one who coined the term neuro-leadership. And what is neuro-leadership, you might be wondering? Neuro-leadership combines neuroscience with leadership development. Now, neuroscience is actually, I think all of you know, the study of the nervous system. But nowadays, it is becoming increasingly multidisciplinary. So they are combining what they know about the nervous system with other subjects. So you have neurobiology, you have all kinds of neuro something. And this is now, David Rock is one of the pioneers of combining what you know about the brain with leadership development in the hope of improving performance. So the SCARF is an acronym. So we will go more into it now. So we will look at SCARF, as we said earlier, because it helps us with greater self-awareness. So before we go on to the model, I would just like tell you a few surprising facts about the brain. Did you know that being left out of a group is like not being invited to a party that everyone is going to? They have actually found out that in our brains don't differentiate the pain so that we feel. We only feel pain. So when I'm not invited and I'm the only one in my neighborhood who's not going to the party, I feel social pain. And it is the same pain as when I put my hand on a very hot plate. That's what the brain signals are. But of course, we feel it socially because we are social beings. So we apparently, according to our own human history, had this instinct towards flight or flee. This is what we're talking about, threats and responses. That when we feel that we are in unfriendly territory or we are threatened, then we want to run away. But when we feel, for instance, rewarded, then we come to what they call the toward state. So apparently our brains, according to this research, and I say apparently, that our brains, whether we like it or not, are firing threat or reward responses even as we speak. And now, because they can use MRI imagery, we can actually monitor the brain activity and we can see what is lighting up in our heads even as we speak. So if we have any questions at this point, before we go into the SCARF model, I'll be happy. Please send them to Anne.
Thank you, Yvonne. I do not have any questions in the chat box right now.
Okay, so maybe as we go on. So the first, let's go into the 5 domains. Our brains are geared towards a threat or reward response. And our limbic system organizes information or responses according to friend or foe. Given that the brain cannot differentiate between social and physical pain, it reads social situations as threats and responses. So how does this system work? David Rock has developed what we will call, or what he calls the SCARF model, and we will discuss it now. Now, what I would like you to do as we talk about this is to think back about your relocation to your current location. If it was some time ago, try and recollect it. And if you're currently going through it, I'm sure it's still all very real and raw. So the first letter is S, and it stands for status. Whether we realize it or not as humans, we are constantly assessing how social encounters enhance or diminish our status. Very simply put, status is about our relative importance to others, whether it's at home, whether it's at school, whether it's our community. So, for instance, we are all quite concerned that we are favorably received by the community. Take, for instance, would you feel great if you knew that, all the parents in your children's school thought you were strange? I don't think so. We even start to feel good when we can beat the computer in a game because we feel an increased status that we can better than the computer or whatever. So I would like you to think about your status when you move to this current location. So could you please mark with an arrow on a piece of paper? We don't want the answers. If you think the move has increased your status, and with an arrow down, if you feel the move has decreased your status. Please don't tell us your answer. Just make a note of it on a piece of paper. We'll tell you what this is all leading to when we finish the SCARF model. Next, C for certainty. We crave certainty. I'm sure we all know this instinctively when I say it. We as human beings do not like ambiguity. You know, we like to know that we can rely on finding electricity when we turn on the lights. And we are fairly resilient. We can actually live with the fact that there will be power outages for 3 hours a day. But what we cannot deal with is that if we don't know when we will have the electricity, when it's coming on, and when it's going off. So think about the relocation process. Is it one full of ambiguity or certainty? Think about moving to the new culture that you are in. Is it an experience of certainty or ambiguity? So again, do the same thing. Mark an arrow going up if you think it's full of certainty, and an arrow going down if you think it's full of ambiguity. Now, A stands for autonomy, which is our sense of control over situations, about having a choice. Think about this move and your children. You think they have a sense of control over moving to a new country? A new school? When you first arrived in your new location, did you have a sense of control of day-to-day life? Again, mark with an arrow if you think you had increased autonomy going up, and an arrow going down if you feel a decrease of autonomy during the move. R is for relatedness, which refers to belonging to a group. We unconsciously ask the question, are they similar or different to me? If I perceive a person to be similar to me, I move towards. Think about the social situations where you have felt so much more at ease with somebody who is like you than somebody who is completely different. If not, I move away. Can you imagine that this happens within seconds, whether you realize it or not? Now, could this be the reason that we inherently are suspicious of strangers? Is this the reason why common and shared experience creates a bond, as in the local chapters of the worldwide program or here in Washington, D.C.? Is it the reason earlier you mentioned social networks and support? Is this why it's so important when relocating? Is this the reason that our children settle better into school? Once they have a few friends, once they feel part of an in-group. Again, in relation to your move, mark it with an arrow going up if you think it has increased your relatedness, and down if it has decreased your relatedness. Now, the last one is F for fairness. There's an innate sense of fairness in all of us. Why do we hate favoritism, even if we're guilty of it ourselves? Now, imagine you had $100 to distribute to a group of 5, and you gave each of one 20. I think they would go away happy. But if you gave one person $60, another 2, and you divided the remainder with the others, do you think everybody would be happy? So when it comes to relocation, sometimes the spouse feels that they may have done the heavy lifting, dealing with the nitty-gritty, doing all the hard work, giving up your career. So when you think about this, do you think it's fair? If it is, mark it with the arrow going up. And if you think that it's not, mark it with an arrow going down. So, in what direction, now that you've noted it on a piece of paper, the general direction of your arrows? If they are moving up, please write up and send your answer to Anne. And if they're going down, please send your answer to Anne saying down.
Oh, we have some downs. One up, more down, up. I think we have some more downs than up here.
Okay, thank you, Anne. So the general feeling is that there are more downs than ups. Well, I sincerely hope that not all your arrows are pointing down, because if you do, you will be in a state of, get me out of here, I've got to go. That is the threat, and you want to run and go. So generally speaking, in reality, we all have a mixture of the arrows moving up. Some are up and some are down. That's generally speaking. And actually, these arrows move all the time during our social interaction. It's not a static thing. It is actually very, very dynamic. So do you have any other questions about SCARF this far? I realize that it's a lot of concepts to take in, so please send your questions to Anne.
Thank you, Yvonne. There's a comment here that says, sometimes I need to fight for a need in which my arrow will go up.
Can you say that again?
Yes, it's a comment. It's saying, sometimes I need to fight for a need in which my arrow will go up.
Exactly. That is exactly, thank you. That is exactly how it helps in self-awareness. For instance, if you feel your status is being threatened, this is exactly how you self-manage, and you say to yourself, now, what is going on here? Okay, now I understand. I feel part of the out group. So just by understanding that, you can then create the opportunity to feel less out or manage the situation better. That is exactly what is meant. For instance, if you're going to have, I can think of a work example. If you're going to have a very difficult conversation, say, with your boss, you build up the status first by saying, well, I do appreciate that, you are the manager and that you ultimately will decide. So that is using autonomy. However, this is how I see the situation. Exactly. Thank you so much.
Great. Many more comments are coming in here.
Okay, fire away.
One says, this makes me laugh, as the reason I don't want to move from here where I've lived for 8 years is because I envisage the move to anywhere, making all the arrows go down. And then another comment says, I end up hanging around with the expat community. And there's another comment here. If I may, one added down is that overseas, my friends are also co-workers of my spouse. I feel I cannot joke around about my wife as much as I would have been able to with non-colleague friends at home, but my spouse still jokes about me.
So that's not fair, obviously. You'll have to find another venue for those jokes. You see, I mean, this is the thing I love about SCARF, actually, because it's so human. We live this even as we speak. That is such a great example of fairness. It's like, okay, so you have to redress the balance in perhaps another area.
Yes, the participant writes further, to solve this, I should find more of my own community apart from the work friends. That's a good way to solve
absolutely.
it.
I was going to say, if we go back to the comment that, not comment, but the slide earlier about adaptation, when you, can find a new community, understanding the culture. If you can go back and make new friends within the community and do something apart from the work colleagues, it's easier said than done, I know, but I think it's well worth the effort. And I think the other point that comes through very well in your comments is that the moving of the arrows is intentional. If you know they're moving down, I love that comment. Yes, of course. When all our 8 arrows are moving, going up, why do we want to flip them around? But life is full of changes, but at least you know that they're going to go down. And so I think very practically, one example is the importance, say, of the Worldwide Program. The Worldwide Program is there as an institution to help you in relatedness. So that is one way that you can immediately at least start to change the direction of the arrows. I know some people say, well, I'm not the coffee morning type of person. I've heard those comments. But in the first stages, rather than let all your arrows go the wrong way, it is a turning point. You don't have, dare I say, have to have coffee mornings all the time in your assignment if you don't like it. Okay? So any more comments? As you can see, I'm a SCARF enthusiast. I love this model.
Yeah. Thank you. I don't have more comments for now, but I want to encourage participants to send in comments and questions as we go along, as you have done already. Thank you. Please continue, Yvonne.
I hope that this walk through SCARF has given you some insight into culture shock. And often the feeling of wanting to leave, to go home. And so now we're going to see how, okay, now we're going to tell a story about culture shock.
That's true. I'm going to read a story from Gael in Ghana, and Yvonne is going to relate the story afterwards to SCARF and to culture shock. Okay, I'm going to read now. I was very happy to go to Ghana. I worked and lived in African countries with very good experiences, so I thought it would be easy going there. After a few weeks, I felt differently. I didn't understand people's behavior. Basic politeness was not the one I knew. But worse, I was feeling I was the foreign female who has money and who is stupid. I worked, traveled, and experienced a lot of different cultures, and I know I'm the foreign woman with money, but everywhere people had respected me, not in Ghana, I thought. I started to be depressed, angry, and I didn't know how to react. Every day was a challenge. The plumber broke the water pump without saying what he did, but demanded to be paid anyway. The vegetable seller at the street corner tried to sell me awful produce, arguing that it was fine quality. Or the electrician who said he would come that same day the generator broke down only came some days later. One day there was no more water. It lasted for a week, but I didn't know. So I ordered the water delivery truck at outrageous price. Of course, the truck never showed up. You have money, so what's your problem? Was the question that I was asked again and again. Yvonne?
Yes. Well, oh gosh, things are not going well. So what do you think is going on there? Well, I see that Gail is threatened in terms of certainty. All of a sudden, she cannot understand what is going on. She doesn't understand the cultural cues, the basic behavior, what she thought was polite, now it wasn't. She didn't feel that people were polite to her. So then, of course, the certainty and relatedness here is affected. There is that feeling of the in-group and the out-group. So I guess she was the out-group because the farmer, the vegetable seller, the water truck, they were all sort of not cooperating with her. So with that came the loss of certainty because she never knew what was going to happen, whether she would have water, whether things would be repaired. And then there was that continuing theme of in and the out group. You have money and we don't. So you could see this event through the eyes, through the lens of scarf. So Anne, would you continue?
Sure. I was used to trust people and their words. You say something, you'll do it. Not in Ghana, at least not for what I experienced. I also felt guilty. I thought I was able to do better. I should be able to do better, adjust better. In the end, I was one of the privileged ones with money, education, cars, and top housing in this country. Was something wrong with me? My husband had similar experiences with colleagues, ministries, and parliamentarians. We were on the same page and could share our bad feelings. I'm glad of that because if not, it would have been a very hard situation. Luckily, my children adjusted quickly and were happy, and unfortunately, our domestic staff were very nice. So despite the constant hassle with water, electricity, our home was a pleasant place to be. I made many expat friends during my stay, some of which I'm still in close contact with. I had plenty of people around me to talk to about my experiences. Often my friends had the same experiences and we talked in circles. It didn't help me get out of feeling bad. I needed something else, but I didn't understand what I was missing or should look for. After the first year, a role as the president of a school board opened up. I took on the role and found comfort in being engaged in this challenging position that kept me very busy. I left my home every morning to work for this board, or I would go to a school for refugees where I began to volunteer. Here I felt very welcome. Now it's been a few years since we left Ghana. My family and I are looking for new opportunities to move to another country of this location. Over to you, Yvonne.
Yes. So things are now looking up for Gail. Fairness. I used to trust people, and now she feels guilty about it. So perhaps there's something wrong with the situation. I'm living in the best places. Why is it that I cannot adjust? But the relatedness does help because her husband and her have common challenges. The children are happy. The home is a safe place, so that adds to a sense of relatedness and perhaps status in the family. It's a happy family. So that's going well. And I think the thing that really helped Gail through the eyes of Scarf anyway is the social status and the exercise of her autonomy when she decides to go out and do volunteer work. And if you see how she describes it, about how she became the role president of the school board, and I took the role and found comfort in being engaged in this challenging position. So this increased her social status to herself, I think, as well as within the community. Now she had a place. And then after that, she worked in the school for refugees as well. That is a place of status. It's addressing the fairness and unfairness component and the sense of autonomy that she chose. This is what I want to do. So you can see here that the arrows are starting to move up. I think the most important thing to realize is that the arrows are moving. So the second point is that you don't want too many arrows going down. And if you can do anything to change the direction of one or two arrows, it will really help in your general, what in brain science is called the forward state. In other words, that you want to collaborate, that you want to get involved. So I hope this helps. And so I was wondering, do you all have any more thought about this model? If you do, please send your comments, questions to Anne.
Yvonne, I have one question related to the Gael story. I recognize the angry feelings. After a while, they went away. I adjusted. But in certain situations, they can come back seemingly out of the blue. Will that be less and less?
Okay, remember we discussed earlier that in adaptation comes in phases, and we oscillate from holding on to letting go. I think a lot of this anger depends what you're angry about. I think certain things are easier to let go than others. I can only speak from my own experience. I found the loss of career took a long time, and that exactly happened to me, that the feelings came and went, and they were particularly strong when I went home to Singapore and saw my friends being very successful. And then the anger would come. As I used to say, we have brokered a very fragile peace. So if you know where to pierce me, the peace was gone very quickly. And it's taken me years, and now I really don't care anymore. So now there is no anger left, but I think sometimes anger takes a while to resolve. So it depends what you're angry about.
Okay. Good. Then we have two more comments here. One is very brief. Great framework. Another one is actually a question.
Yes.
Are culture shocks more heavy when you move to a country very different from your own country?
I think the popular literature will say yes, because when it is the cultural themes are very, very different from yours. I think so. I think personality also makes a difference. Yes, for different reasons. I think sometimes culture shock is difficult because of the differences. Sometimes culture shock is comes intensely because you did not expect to have it, and that is the reverse, where you move to very similar situations.
Great, thank you. That's all for now. We can continue.
Okay, so now the 5 components of adjustment. Here are some ways to help reverse the direction of your arrows from down to up. Now, language and cultural skills. I can't actually say how important, emphasize how important this is, because it returns certainty and autonomy. It brings relatedness as well, because you can become friends with host country nationals because you can speak, you understand their culture. It helps you to feel more in an in-group. Now you understand why sometimes people giggle when they're afraid, and you know how to ask for something in a grocery store, so that returns that sense of autonomy to you. You know where to go when your child gets when your child is ill and needs attention, because you can actually speak the language. So you can become more of an in-group because you actually understand how your hosts think and feel, and you can make new friends. So I really think this is a very, very important way to help turn your arrows. The next one then is a comfortable home base, a point of stability. because here you can do things your way. You can return again some certainty. In routines, we bring certainty, right? And because it's your home, you can say how you want things done. And I think if we look back to Gail's story, you see how important it was for them as a family to have a comfortable home base. And this is probably, we're not conscious of this, but this is why housing is such a priority when you relocate. Just think of how much time we all invest into finding the right house and how upset we are when we cannot find anything that we really like. So there's a psychological drive behind it. There is stability, and because you can do things your way here, and you feel like one group in the family. So a comfortable home base. Next. Is new friendships and support systems. This really builds heavily on relatedness. And our status also increases because, as we have seen, we feel part of the in-group now. We are part of the community. We can contribute. You can see the most positive part of Gail's story was actually right at the end when she says, and now I took the role of president, and all the good things that came as a result of her volunteering in the school and volunteering in the refugee camp. Okay, because here you can contribute, you can make new friends, build new social networks. The next one is the ability to navigate new environments with confidence. I think this is where, again, this craving for certainty and autonomy that we have, we become less dependent on others because we know our way around. We know where to go for things. We generally know how it works. I mean, even if we don't like the way it works, we do know how the system turns. So it returns the control back to our lives. And to a certain extent, a lot of culture shock is about the loss of control. So when you can return the control to yourself, then you start to move out of that shock phase. And last but not least, the meaningful and enjoyable activities. Now, this brings relatedness and autonomy because you would choose the activities you wanted to join. So it's autonomy. And with that, you have the relatedness of a group. You feel your status goes up because you feel part of an in-group. All of you like the same things together. It's the in and the out group business, okay? And this is because you choose, and we all know that adjustment is a complicated process, but hopefully as we learn why we feel what we feel, in this case, culture shock, we can do something to reduce the pain in our lives and what threatens us, because that is the brain message, or rather that's the message your brain is receiving. So instead of showing the 5 components of adjustment, we can intentionally focus on creating this forward state. And we can help ourselves using these 4 components. And then we can arrive at the live and the let live stage. And relatedness, you know, is a key factor here. So do you have any questions at this point before we go on?
Please send your questions to me or any comments. I think we should go on, Yvonne.
Okay, so we are going to share now a story from Chiara of her experience in Lebanon. I know we can all identify with various aspects of Chiara's experience, so let's listen to her story now and send any questions to Anne at the end.
We moved to Beirut, Lebanon in 2007. The consequences of the recent war with Israel but we were very happy and excited to go and live there. I was 7 months pregnant with our first child, so everything was new to us. New country, new house, new environment, and a new person was going to join our little family on our new adventure. Moving to a new country is always a challenge. You always have to start from bottom and build up everything from scratch. New home, new car, and get used to the traffic, new documents, new grocery shops, new doctors, new office for your spouse or partner, new environment, new friends, new fears, you name it. These times we also had a little child and things looked a little bit more complicated than before. I went back to my hometown to have my baby, but I returned to Beirut when our son was 18 days old. I cried as I never cried in my life. I was alone. My family was far away. I had no friends. My husband was working in a new office and was busy with it. And I had a baby and I didn't know what to do and how to deal with this new situation. I was missing our previous post very much. I was missing my home country, my family, my old friends. We had been living in the Middle East before, but Lebanon was different. Everything was new, and also the mentality of the people and their habits were unknown to me. We had rough moments like the unrest that happened in 2008. We had to celebrate my son's first birthday locked in our apartment while shooting was happening very close to downtown Beirut, just a few minutes from our house. But I love this life. I love to live in different countries, to meet new people, and discover new cultures. And I guess that curiosity and the inner instinct to survive pushed me through the most difficult moments. Thanks to the spouse of a colleague of my husband, I started to know new people, having new friends, getting to know the town and the country and the Lebanese people. Lebanon is a fascinating country, full of contradictions. I took Arabic lessons, and also thanks to my teacher, I learned a lot about the country and its habits. We had the opportunity to meet new people who became great friends of ours. We met old university colleagues that happened to be working there too. What a joy to meet them again after such a long time. We lived in a beautiful house and had wonderful domestic help that made life very comfortable. After a while, I managed to work for the UN as a consultant. How important to feel useful also outside the household. Moreover, our twin sons were born in Beirut, so now an important part of our life is linked to that place. We were feeling at home again. It's been 2.5 years since we left Lebanon, and even though I'm happy to be where I am now, I miss Beirut, I miss Lebanon, and I miss the Middle East. But most of all, I miss the excitement of moving to a new country, a new culture, a new environment. I chose this lifestyle, and I was lucky enough to share this passion with my husband. I see how useful it is also for our children to have the opportunity to live in different countries and to get to know different cultures. It is not easy to leave everything and start all over again every time you move country, but it is absolutely priceless in terms of personal growth that you get from it.
Let's look at Chiara's story and see what it tells us about the globally mobile life, which is our common experience. She was excited about her move. Remember how many times she used the word new? The initial adaptation to Lebanon was made more joyous by the arrival of her twins, but it also made adapting much more difficult in a new country without family. But because of the spouse of a colleague, she started to make new friends and get to know the Lebanese people and find her way around. Now here you see the 5 components of adjustment. New friends, navigating a new environment, and then to scarf, she got a job. And the words, I think, came very clear. I chose this lifestyle. That is the autonomy. Then the relatedness, shared passion with friends, meeting old friends, making new friends. So that, I hope you can see the different models that we've talked about today, the factors that affect adaptation, the components that help us adjust, and the scarf, and how this is all interwoven into our relocation stories. And I think this sums it up so well in Chiara's own words. It is not easy to leave everything and start all over again every time you move, but it's absolutely priceless in terms of the personal growth you get from it. I hope that these words resonate with all of us. And now I will turn it over to Anne.
Thank you. If you have any comments, insights, questions, please send them into my inbox. Let's see if we're receiving some. Not yet. I want to say thank you many times to Yvonne for this presentation. It was very interesting. I think it helps us understand the concept of culture shock and how we can adapt better in our environments by reflecting on how this scarf is wrapped up or down, how we can modify the direction. Thank you, Yvonne, for the effort you have put into this and for always being so supportive of WBFN. Before we say goodbye, I have a few more important things to tell you. So please hang on another 2 minutes.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me. As you know, a lot of these issues are close to my heart. So if you have any questions later on, even, please send them to Anne.
Great. Thank you. Yvonne, please mute your microphone. There's some background noise. Thank you. First, I would like to point your attention to the resources that are available to you. You have WBFN, of course. Connect with a local champion, as we call our contact persons, and other spouses. The WBFN Worldwide program has presence now in more than 50 locations by more than 70 champions. So use your network, WBFN, and other organizations. You can find a lot of help and inspiration on the WBFN website. If you don't find what you're looking for, since it's currently under reconstruction, send us an email. Take a look at the WBFN Facebook page, our LinkedIn and YouTube channel. All what you see have been built by people in a similar situation like you, wanting something, offering to help others. So if you spot an area of improvement, don't hesitate to deploy your thoughts and action and send us an email about that. Among the resources, I think you should take notice of the Tools to Move website. It's a useful website developed also by the World Bank Family Network's members, including Yvonne, a few years ago, before Yvonne was employed by the bank. There's a link to this website from the WBFN website too. Tools to Move talks wisely about everything between planning a move to retirement, from packing checklists to the psychology of moving in a concise way. Some of us who have several moves behind us may think it's not for us, but check it out anyway. You may realize a few new things. And secondly, you should know about the Family Consultation Service. It's a free, confidential service for World Bank Group spouses, partners, and dependents, children over 18. It's about any personal concern. Consultation and referral is either by phone, Skype, or appointment. Counselors are on call all the time. From some countries, the phone call is free. You can always find these phone numbers on the WBFN's homepage under Emergencies. The Hub is a domestic abuse task force. It can be relevant if you know a spouse or a staff whom you think could be a victim of domestic abuse. You can discreetly let your friend know about the Hub and its specially trained team of advisors, psychological and legal counselors. Both the Family Consultation Service and the Hub are services provided by an external contractor. Counseling is available in many languages. Finally, I would like to continue the conversation with you, or we would like to continue the conversation. If you have some questions that were not answered during the webinar, or some new questions arise after we log off, you're welcome to send them along with suggestions maybe for future conferences to the worldwide team at WBFN.org. Sari, whom you met in the beginning, and I check this account daily. Last but not least, the WBFN community rely on sharing experiences and learning. So we would love to get your feedback from this webinar. So please answer our 1-minute online survey. The link will arrive in your inbox shortly. And now, there's only left to say many thanks for participating today, and goodbye for now.